my bookhos. Today we are making this adorable little pumpkin beret, and it might be my favorite DIY of the season thus far. Hello and welcome to Bookhoarding by Bianca. I'm Bianca, and sometimes we talk about books, but today I'm talking about another cool Halloween autumn-ish DIY. This hat. Now, if you've been following, you know that I am doing a ton of cute little Halloween DIYs leading up to Halloween, about 13 weeks of projects, and this is my next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe because you don't want to miss all of the other fun DIYs I'm going to be making this season, do you? If you've previously missed my DIYs, I made this cute little Batwing inspired yoked linen shirt, and I've got more cool projects with this exact linen coming up. Now, for me, this was 100% a scrap project, so you're welcome, scrap monster. But, you know, if you have a specific fashion fabric you do want to make with this, or you don't have an orange that will work, go for it, go find it, go have fun with it. You can also vary it up and think of other gourds and pumpkin-y things, other squashes. So if you have a really cool, like, kind of dappled fabric that's like a yellow or a green or whatever, it could totally work too. Don't limit yourself and have fun with this one because it's easy and kind of fun. Alright, here's what you're going to need for this. You're going to need some felt, sewing supplies, embroidery thread. If you don't want to use felt, let's say other kind of fabrics. If you use something that's lighter than felt, make sure that you get a stable kind of lining or stabilizer of some kind. And then you're going to want lining fabric. And that's about it, other than also the things to make your patterns. So you'll probably need paper of a large size for this, bigger than your printer paper, just to get the pattern down, or you could use just half of a piece of paper to try to do it. I would say, you know, see if you can use a grocery bag, a paper bag if you have any of those, newspaper, wrapping paper, any of those things work just fine to make a pattern that you're going to use for this. Okay, I think that's it. Are you excited to make a pumpkin beret? You should be. It's really cute and it's really fun. Let's make a pumpkin beret. All right, so first you're going to make patterns to do this. The big circle is the outer beret, and my smaller circle that you see here is supposed to represent my head, but I forgot to make it even smaller for seam allowance, so take note of that because you definitely want to make that inner circle smaller for seam allowance, and I'll show you how I use these two pieces. So this is the top outer piece. This is the beret part, the outer piece that's not against my head. And this, I basically got a ruler, put it in the center of a piece of paper, and measured out 6 inches to make a 12-inch wide circle, but I used the little tip of a measuring tool to center it, like I pinned it into it, and then just drew a circle. And then this is how I'm using that centerpiece. I'm pinning it to this, and I have to piece it because I don't have enough orange felt because I'm just using scraps that I have for felt to make this. So I'm going to be piecing that inner circle that is against my head. Now, again, I forgot to add seam allowance to this, and I really should have done that. So, I think it was like a 3.5 for 22-inch head space. So I'd say however you calculate the radius for your head, when you're doing this, don't forget to, after you figured out the radius, subtract whatever seam allowance you think is going to be needed, because I forgot to do that. And yeah, that's why this braid is a little bit big on me, but I might add like an inner band at some point. That'll kind of hug my head, but yeah, don't make my mistake. So I am just piecing this, and since the middle circle is the part that's cut out, I can manipulate this a little bit more and, you know, have it on that bigger piece of the cutout for the top of the beret. So that's what I'm doing here. So instead of making a pattern piece that's the negative space, I just did this I don't know. Is it better? Probably not. But this is what I did. I think I did this mostly because I knew I'd maybe be piecing this and shifting this. So it was a personal choice. Is it a good choice? That's a different question completely than if it's a personal choice. Anyway, needless to say, inner circle, add that seam allowance because it's going to be too wide once you sew it down, Miss Hernandez-knight. I'm getting my my little sewing tool, my little thing that I use for patterning class. That's like the pokey thing. Because I was like, oh, if I do this, I'll see that on the other side. Not really, but like, you know, whatever. But I did use those little holes as a guideline when I was sewing or when I was cutting it out. So I guess not use this completely. Anyway, so you're gonna cut out the felt pieces for this, and you're gonna have just an outer layer for the top and an inner layer for the inside. I pieced my inner layer. Obviously, too, you'll eventually get lining, which I'll show later, I believe. But yeah, this is my life piecing. I'd say piecing is period, but we're not doing a period costume, so it doesn't make sense. Anyway, look at it. And now I'm like, okay, cool. How did the pieces line up now? So I'm just kind of truing that up, and I'm going to be truing that up, and then just kind of pinning it, and I'll hand sew a little bit later to get that all lined up. But that circle on the inside should have been smaller to actually fit my head. Alas. Now, this next part is a personal choice. Basically, I was trying to get a quilted, kind of give dimension to the pumpkin embroidery, the little embroidery for the sides of the pumpkin. So I used more felt and cut a second layer of felt for the top. You don't really need to do this, I don't think. But I was trying to give it a little bit of just like body. So that's why I did this. And I used, scrap felt that I had and just sized it to match that. And you've seen now I've pinned it on and I've done my little pumpkin bits that I'm going to be sewing, embroidering along. Yeah, I just used chalk and I just kind of freehanded it. I tried not to make it look too much like a basketball. It will still look like a basketball. So here are the ways that I changed this up to not look like a basketball, which was I tried to make those lines not just like exactly like a basketball. And then I did do embroidery, so I suggest maybe not using black, maybe like a gray or a brown or maybe darker orange. I don't know. Experiment. I'm just doing a basic back stitch along this, by the way. And then the other thing that I did as well, which I will show in a second, was make pumpkin leaves to go on top. And I think that really helps. But fair warning that as you're doing this part, you will be like, this just looks like a basketball. I'm just making a basketball beret. Which, like, if you're into basketball, like, you could just make the leaves detachable. And you have this basketball beret for when you go to basketball games. But, like, I definitely was having just this moment of, I'm making this whole project, and it's just going to look like a basketball at the end of it, isn't it? I did, by the way, so I start in the center for these, but then I didn't go all the way to the edge in case I needed to bring the seam in a little. You can see some of those that, they're not all the way to the edge. There's like maybe 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch space just for truing those edges and getting those even. I didn't want to cut off the edge of the embroidery. But yeah, a little simple back stitch I think gives a nice little rustic look. And you can see it's later in the day, I assume, at this point for me, because of the lighting. All right, so it is time to make leaves. I have two little patterns here. They're little half patterns because I'm going to fold the fabric. I made a big leaf and a small leaf. I will hopefully have uploaded and linked the pattern for this by the time you watch this. If not, it will be coming. The link will be in my description. You can follow my blog, also in the description. But I basically made this little leaf, little half pattern. I got a big one and a small one. Oh, I decided to brighten up that screen midway in filming. Could I have stopped the camera? Yeah. Should I have? Probably. But here we are. Anyway, so I'm cutting this out. For the stem, for the half thing, you definitely, like for the stencil, I drew it in, but you can make it smaller, because depending on how wide you want to make that. So just pay attention to that. And yeah, you had two little leaves. Little leaves. You can use not felt for this as well, I will say. So yeah, I'm just kind of placing it, and I think that makes a huge difference in making it not look like a basketball. So, how do you make your little leaf look a little bit more three-dimensional, like way I made mine? So you just pinch. I pinch a little bit for the middle. I pinch off to about a third on the side, and a third on the side as well. And then you undo it, and that's going to be your little leaf. Obviously, I'm going to sew it down, but yeah, you just sew down those kind of quote stems, and then you turn it over, and there's dimension. So there it is. Look at it. And now I've basted them on at this point, so they kind of stay where I want them to. But yeah, I think that makes a massive difference in this looking like a basketball versus a pumpkin. I love that. I love how they turned out. I actually did add a little, yes, Sharpie later, gasp, Sharpie for dimension, just to give it some shading. Here I am just sewing the lining, so that is just some basic lining that I had, and again, I'm doing the same pieces that I cut out of the orange, which was one layer for the outer circle, the big circle for the beret, and then making that the circle that's going to go around my head. Again, the inner circle should have made that whole thing actually fit my head better, but I digress. Anyway, so any kind of lining fabric that you have that you typically work with is going to work great here. And then you need to bring your brain around how do you insert your lining, which I will show you in a second. Alright, so you're going to grab all of your layers now. We do need to sew that beret bottom to the beret top. And I'm just going to pin that in place now. And don't forget to position your leaves so they will not be in the way during this process, because that's going to be a problem. You don't want it to get sewn down. So just pay attention to where they are during this. I'm just truing the edges, getting those so there's not excess. And then I'm just sewing around the outside. So we have a nice little pumpkin beret layer that we can easily join with the lining. Just use my sewing machine for this. You're going to want to make sure that it doesn't stretch out too much, get wonky. And then I also, after I sewed it, I think I also cut a little extra off the edges just to reduce the amount of bulk in this thing, because it can get kind of bulky because of the felt. So that's just an FYI. And I guess too, if your felt is not as, or whatever materials you're using are not as sturdy as you'd like, you can use some heavier interfacing. So the lining is now right side out, and I tuck it into this, facing the right side. So it's outsides to outsides, but it's inside out. Just go with it, trust me. Then I'm tucking this in to the edges, kind of without being able to see if it actually gets the edges, which is fine. Like, this is all going to be inside, and like, if it's not perfect, it's fine, because it's going to stay on the inside. Like, if you don't cut it massively, if you don't cut the lining massively oversized, if it's a little kind of like shifty inside, if it moves around, I would say you can probably do a couple tacking stitches. So I just pin this into place, and then I'm just gonna sew in this. Now, reminder to leave an inch and a half of space between the start and the end of the seam, so that you can pull this inside out, because that is the vital part of inserting this lining. Alright, so using that little hole that I just mentioned, you're now going to pull the beret so that it is no longer inside out, but outside out. Depending on how thick your materials are and how stiff, you might want to make that hole a little bit bigger. It is up to you. But here you can see me struggling along, but eventually getting it out. And it's just going to take some futzing with and some, you know, meandering to get to kind of a good space. And then I just hand sewed that shut, the hole that we left. Because, you know, I could have machine sewed, I think, the hole inside, and I probably will at some point. But for now, I just hand sewed it. Again, you can see how small that inner circle is. It's fine on my head because I can tuck my hair into it a little, but like, don't forget your seam allowance, kids. Don't make my mistakes. Don't make my mistakes. Okay, look at it. Oh my god, it's so cute. What is this I see? Oh, Scrappy, is that you? Felty? I remember you from the early scrap pile days. Oh my goodness. Oh dear, she is working through her scrap pile. The more scraps she uses, the more powerful I become. Okay, so regardless of me messing up the inside seam allowance, which like, oh my god, that's a totally me thing to do, especially I'm in the middle of taking a pattern making class, so of course, even though I learn every week, reminder, don't forget your seam allowances, for some reason, when I was making this, I forgot my seam allowances, so like, fail to myself, whatever. Learn from my mistakes, and I will update you if I do put something else in here to keep it on better, like a little band of some kind with elastic. I think it works fine. I might maybe add like a little comb or a clip to see if it stays in better, but not really going anywhere because we're in a panini. But if I do add something, I will let y'all know and see how it works. If you're looking for the pattern for the pumpkin leaves, don't forget to check out the link in the description. That should hopefully now or in a few days have the pattern to make said leaves. And if you would like to know what audiobook I was listening to while I was making this, it was Island Queen by Vanessa Riley, which is really cool and really good, and actually going to have an adaptation coming up, so please check out that book. If you haven't checked out Vanessa Riley's work before, she does an amazing job of using real histories to inspire her stories. She has a Regency romance series, and then there's Island Queen, and like, just check out her stuff because she centers Black women, women from the Caribbean, women who are dealing with colonialism and colonial power, and like all of the issues around white supremacy, but like in this traditional 1700s, early 1800s space, which is typically really dominated by like white women, white men's stories. So it's really cool to finally have somebody bringing a lot of diversity and a lot of needed diversity to this space. Which is to say, if you really liked Bridgerton, the series, but the books not so much because it's all white people, unlike the show, check out Vanessa Riley's work. And with that, we have completed yet another fun Halloween DIY. Again, don't forget to stick around because you don't want to miss all of these. So like, subscribe, share. Extra points because I am definitely trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. So if you could, help me along the way, that would be really fun. And thank you. I would appreciate it. Reminder, patrons at my Lizzie Bennett tier above get a shout out right here. And you can join my Patreon or donate to my Ko-fi. Links are in the description. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to make it so.